ADVrider.com and eBay Motors welcome you to episode 71 of The Lowdown Show. I'm Neil Graham. Of late, big things have been happening at Harley-Davidson. In addition to the release of their second quarter financial report, a new CEO has been welcomed into the fold. To parse this information, we turn to Motorcycle Global's Michael Ullaric, who, as always, looks for a silver lining in a roiling sea of gloom. But first, eBay has a few words they'd like to share with you. Yes, it's the lowdown. eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. With their new secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery, it's all built in. And eligible vehicle purchases are backed by up to $100,000 in protection. This is what modern car buying looks like. Get your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchases powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. Well, Michael, you are in Bologna, working on a top secret project that we're not going to talk about. But your family's with you, so that's good. That'll keep you out of trouble. But more significant for this conversation is that Harley-Davidson has just announced its second quarter earnings.
Second quarter, first half.
Second quarter earnings for 2025. And I'm going to pull them up on screen. And you may have a few thoughts about this, I'm guessing.
Not just me, but yeah, let's just start by saying this is catastrophic.
Catastrophic. Okay, well, decipher this for me, will you?
Okay, so there's a lot going on in the economy right now, obviously with tariffs and, trade, and there's a number of things that are causing downward pressure on a lot of aspects of the economy in North America and the world. This is not reflective of that. So second quarter of the year is the main motorcycle selling quarter for sales. It's spring to early summer. This is where you're supposed to have your best numbers. Now, it's not a secret. This is a subject that's been talked about by me, certainly a lot. And it's not a secret. Harley-Davidson has had a disastrous decade. Sales have been sliding for 10 years. And, not a little, like 40+% over 10 years. But, the slide was kind of consistent. It was like a roughly 10%, very rudely 10% a year. That's bad, but revenues were strong. What does that mean? It means they made money. And but this second quarter and the second half performance, there are three components to Harley-Davidson. There's Harley-Davidson Motor Company. That's the business of making and selling motorcycles. There's Harley-Davidson Financial Services, which loans money to people who buy Harleys. And then there's HDI, which is Harley-Davidson Incorporated, which is the umbrella for the whole thing.
Right.
Normally, there's like peaks and valleys. This is just brutal. Like HDI's, the main umbrella, is down 11%. And it's 11%, and it was at 11% again last year. So acceleratingly down. And you go 11, that's bad. But then it gets worse. Profits are down almost by 50%. And this was the one trick that
profits down 50% for the overall Harley-Davidson company,
for the whole organization.
Right.
And what's causing that drag is, Motor Company, Harley-Davidson Motor Company revenue is down 23%. Motor Company sales are down 15%. But here's the kicker: margins are down almost 70%.
Explain what does margins mean in this context?
Profit margin. So,
Okay.
You could say revenue is how much money we make. So we sell a thing for $10, you have $10 in revenue. But then you've got to pay for that thing. You got to pay for overhead and whatever. So you got to subtract from that $10 all your costs. And what's left is your profit margin. And the margins that Harley has commanded for 10 years have been the envy of the entire global motorcycle industry. They used to be in the high double digits, like 22, 24%. Crazy luxury, margins.
Can you compare that to, say, another brand like Yamaha or Honda? just for comparison?
For sure. So a mainstream mass market brand is lucky to be in the 3 to 5% gross margin.
And Harley was in the 20s, low
20s,
20s.
20s, okay?
Wow.
Which is why the company was so successful. And the reason, these were low technology products, and they are. I'm sorry this is not a criticism of anyone who likes these motorcycles. It has nothing to do with that. As a direct comparison, product to product, a Harley-Davidson is a low technology motorcycle. It's steel tube frame, they're air cooled, mostly engines, and even their liquid cooled motors are low stress, low performance. So there's not a lot there that drives the prices up, other than the finishes, which are deservedly
exquisite.
Exquisite.
Nobody can powder coat a rocker box like Harley-Davidson.
No, their paint shop is the best in the business, and they take a lot of care in that. But the bottom line is that they were able to eke out incredible profits, sell moderate technology products at exotic product prices. That margin is down 69% this half, and the tariff load is something that's also in the investor presentation. It was $17 million this year in 6 months. The tariffs only took effect in April. So it's really 17 million in three and a half months. That's significant when you're only making $417 million in profit. That's a significant bite. Livewire is a continued dumpster fire. They sold a total of 88 motorcycles this year, with a loss of 40 million. And then there's more bad news. 49,000 brand new unsold units in global inventory. They're on track to sell about 120,000 units this year. So more than a third of their total sales volume is languishing on dealer showroom floors. So what does the big picture tell you? People don't want the products they're selling, certainly not in the numbers that they used to. That change is accelerating. The decline over the last 3 years, 5 years, which we can look at in a second, is accelerating. Added to that, the noose or the anchor around their waist, which is the tariff duties, which are significant. European sales, which is the only market outside of the US and Canada that have any kind of significant volume, are down by 25%. The tariff is going to make it essentially unsellable, because Europe has the same economic pressures as everywhere else. The bikes were already marginal in the EU in terms of demand. They're down by 25% so far, with 2 quarters to go. And then you've got 50,000 units sitting on sales. It's telling us that dealers are going to have to slash prices. They're going to cut their margins. Harley's going to have to do incentives, whether it's financing incentives or just straight up cut pricing. And that's going to eat into their margins even further. Otherwise, they're going to end this year with a ballooning number of vehicles on dealer showroom floors. And that's going to have enormous downward price pressure on the fleet of bikes that are still out there. This is terrible. This is so much worse, so much worse than the next bad performer in the market, which is KTM.
Explain to me something, and my understanding of economics is slightly less than I understand, the physics of the universe. But how does it work? So let's just, Ducati makes 55,000 motorcycles a year, and we all praise Ducati as being successful. And Harley's selling, 120, as you said, and yet they are dire. So draw a picture, if you can, Michael, about why is one successful and one not, and because they're selling it's not obviously not 19 million like Honda, but they're selling a reasonable number of motorcycles, and yet they are catastrophically, struggling. So explain this for me.
It's really straight. Really, you don't need a degree in economics. Business is at its core pretty simple. You got to sell things for more than they cost to make. That's it. Line go up. If If you're selling lemonade on the corner and it costs you 10 cents to make a glass of lemonade, you got to sell it for at least 11 cents or you're really losing money. And operating a manufacturing business is very expensive. Any manufacturing business, you could be making toilet paper. That's a bad example. Paper products are actually incredibly expensive to make, but
Yeah, I know.
you have to have, there are these big cost inputs that you cannot control. You cannot control the price of steel. You cannot control the price of electricity. You cannot control the price of shipping. These are out of your hand. And when we're talking about the first two things, energy and raw materials, the current US administration has made both those inputs dramatically more expensive, particularly for a business operating in the United States. All American automakers have reported record losses this quarter due to increased cost of inputs and indirectly related to tariff. So that means that you have, as a business, you have a choice. You can eat that cost to keep your pricing, which means you're losing profits or possibly going negative, or you pass that price on to the consumer. Harley is the trifecta of doom. They have a product that no longer fits the sweet spot of the market. They deserve credit, and we all envied them. For 20 years, it was a cash cow. People were spending $25,000 to $45,000 on these beautifully finished luxury motorcycles, touring bikes, and such. And they were happy, and Harley was happy, and HDFS was happy to sell loans to those people to finance those bikes. The market has changed, and the market has shrunk. So the number of people who want this type of product has dramatically reduced. The number of people who like it but can afford it has dramatically reduced. And the cost to produce that product has dramatically increased.
Right.
And so add to that, HDI, the mothership, has enormous financial liabilities because, and this is really important for people to understand, I am not criticizing you or anybody who enjoy Harley-Davidson products. I'm not even criticizing the product per se. I could do that, but it's not what we're talking about today.
It's too early.
It's too early. I need at least 3 drinks. But no, it's a criticism of the business. What people misinterpret is that Harley-Davidson is not a motorcycle manufacturing business first. Harley-Davidson has their principal product is their stock price, their stock value, and the dividend that is given to shareholders. That is the main product of HDI. And when they cannot produce the dividend, a dividend is money back, given back to shareholders.
Yes.
On a per share basis. Who are the shareholders of Harley-Davidson? Do you think it's these fat cats, it's these billionaires? No, it's my dearly departed mother's pension fund. It's probably your pension fund to the audience listening. The Ontario nurses and teachers pension funds. It's a lot of private equity firms. Where did they get their money from? Pension funds and other investment vehicles. They depend on that dividend for their return. And Harley-Davidson has been a reliable place to park your money for 25 years. That's why Wall Street loved them. Harley could go out today and raise $1 billion on the street. No other motorcycle company could do that. But the reason is, and here's the key, it's not a motorcycle company. It's a financial services company with a motorcycle side gig. And that kabuki is what has made them so much money in the past. And that business model is breaking down because they've had 5 CEOs as of today in like 11 years and 3 turnaround plans. And the ship isn't not sinking, it's sinking faster. So this is bad. And let me be clear, I am not happy about this. No one should be happy about this. People will lose their savings. people will lose their jobs. And Harley-Davidson, like the products or not, is an important staple of the global motorcycle industry. So this is very bad news for everyone.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. It's all thanks to their new secure purchase. Ever try to buy a car and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? Or spend half the day at the dealership talking to pushy salespeople and signing paperwork? Or maybe, worst of all, waiting for hours at the DMV just to transfer the title? Well, that era is over. For years, eBay has been the go-to for gearheads, collectors, and do-it-yourselfers. Because whatever you're into, from classics to SUVs to trucks to imports, eBay's got it. And now with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your next ride, it's where you can buy it, start to finish. Sellers and titles are verified, paperwork is handled by experts, and payments are traceable and digital. So you know exactly who you're dealing with and exactly what you're getting. Plus, you can finance, insure, and register your vehicle all in one place. No more hours at the dealership, no more trips to the DMV. Get your vehicle plates and paperwork shipped to your door, ready to drive. And it's all part of one seamless process designed to feel as easy as buying anything else online. And eligible vehicles purchased on eBay are backed by up to $100,000 in purchase protection. Thinking about selling your ride? Secure Purchase makes that simple too, because you know your buyer and their funds are verified. If you still owe on your car, the financing payoff is fully integrated, so you're not chasing paperwork or waiting on checks to clear. And with Secure Purchase, you get paid fast. And you're not going to be stuck chasing no-shows or answering the fifth, "Is it still available?" message. This is what modern car buying looks like. Skip the DMV, skip the sketchy meetups. Buy it on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary. The Lowdown Show is presented by advrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. One of the peculiarities, I think, of business, and I was reading something about one of the airlines' rewards programs, was actually worth more than the airline itself. And now I have a bizarre sense of finance, admittedly, and I'm functioning at about a grade 3 level. But, one company owns airplanes and has all this staff, and the other company is, manages what digital assets, I suppose you could say. And yet, with Harley-Davidson, it seems like to me there's a comparable thing going on, which is the financial services, who you go to get a loan to buy Harley, is really the part of the company that is by far the most valuable. Is that correct?
Absolutely, without a shadow of doubt.
And so Harley is now announced that they are going to sell a portion of the HDFS, Harley-Davidson Financial Services. Now, is this, as it would appear to me, is this incredibly short-sighted just to get some cash to keep the wolves from the door?
Yes. So there are two parts to your line of questioning. So I'm going to start by explaining the first part, which is how is that worth more than the bricks and mortar and factory and stuff. So look, I'm not an economist, so I learned this the hard way, which is mostly by losing money.
Well, you did it well. Congratulations.
So why is an airline worth less than the points plan, or how can HDFS be worth more than Harley-Davidson Motor Company? It's because you and I, we are normal people, and we understand debt differently than say Wall Street does. This is the key point. Harley-Davidson Motor Company is very expensive because you need a factory. You need complex and expensive machinery. You need very skilled, expensive humans to make all that work. You need, sales staff, marketing staff, leadership, and then you need thousands of workers, and you need logistics, and all it's money, 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 money. Nobody has that money. You borrow money to build factories, to run even an established 100-year-old brand. You're borrowing vast amounts of money. Now, you and I as individuals, we understand that debt is bad, right? Like, you owe money on your car. You don't really, the car is in your name until you default on the payment, and then the financial institution comes and reclaims the car and then still puts you on the hook for the remainder of the money plus fees. A factory or an airline, manufacturer, same thing. Air Canada doesn't own its airplanes. It leases them. It's a liability. The building that they house all their staff in is rented or owned with a mortgage. It's a liability. They're all debts, debt. And the business works only when more money comes in than goes out. So you can make the payments on it's revolving credit. It's revolving debt. So your debt, if you're a factory or a manufacturer like Harley, is a liability. When you're a financial services company, like Harley-Davidson Financial Services, or the airline, the company that leases the airplanes to Air Canada, that debt is an asset. It's the opposite. HDFS holds billions of dollars in debts. That's not a problem. That's the value, because they can sell those debts to another bank, to another financial institution, because those debts are debts to you and me, people who bought motorcycles. But to HDFS, they're collecting incredible amounts of profit on those debts, because every debt payment has interest, as we all know. Mm-hmm. And that first spreadsheet that from the Harley-Davidson presentations shows HDFS brought in about a quarter as much money as like 25% as much money as Harley-Davidson Motor Company. So you go, well, that's less. Yeah, but it's all profit. Because what does it cost to run HDFS? Okay, there's some very smart, expensive, highly skilled finance people, but a tenth as many as the number of people running a factory and marketing and R&D. They don't need any machinery. They don't need anything. They need laptops and a desk. And then you look at the margin. HDFS is running credit card margins, 25, 27%. And it's growing. So that explains how financial services is a profit machine. It's cheap to run a financial services arm, and the profit margin is high, and it's growing because debts grow. So motor company, exact opposite. You got to borrow in order to make stuff, to market stuff, to develop stuff, to sell stuff. And then when the sales collapse, as they have, the debts are still there. So let's get back to the sale of HDFS. HDI, Harley-Davidson Incorporated, the umbrella, is looking at the two children that they have, the motor company and HDFS. One is the successful son with the chiseled jaw and the beautiful hands, beautiful wife and beautiful kids and savings and everything. And the other one is, to follow the metaphor, the guy working in the shop with dirt under his fingernails. Everyone loves HDMC. Everybody loves that guy. He's fun. He's got cool. He's character. He's lovable. He's a great hang. But he's up to his eyeballs in debt. And there's no way out. And the nice son is kind of a boring guy, actually kind of not nice, a bit of an asshole. But man, he's got his shit together. So what they've done is they've sold almost 10% of HDFS. And what have they sold? Harley-Davidson still has a controlling interest, but they've sold up to $5 billion of debt. Remember, HDFS debts are assets.
Yes.
So they are selling the family jewels. Allow me to tell a beautiful story to make this point, really drive this point.
I wish I had some music to lay underneath this.
My family, part of my family comes from Slovakia, a very poor, very pretty country in Eastern Europe. In the heart of Slovakia, there is a valley with this beautiful castle called Trenčín Castle. It's really storybook, fairy tale castle. I went for a tour there years ago, and I understand the language, so I took the local tour and I listened to this very fetching young woman walk us to the castle and tell us all the stories, the typical historical things, the family that established the little fiefdom and battles with Mongol hordes and, who died in the dungeon and stuff like that. Great medieval lore, right? We get to the 19th century, and the duke or count or whatever of the family had a son, and they said, we're gonna, times are changing, feudal times are ending, we're going to send our son to Italy to learn, to go to a university, learning knowledge. That's the way forward. Long story short, guy comes back to Trenčín. He loved Italy. I don't blame him. So he ends up back in Eastern Europe, and he's like, we are going to grow fruit. This is the way forward. I love this fruit that I discovered in Italy. It's called a pineapple. Now, you don't need to be an expert in horticulture to understand that pineapples need a certain kind of environment, climate in which to grow that Slovakia cannot support. Within half a generation, the noble family that owned the castle were so broke that they were knocking out the wood frames of doorways to burn for firewood to survive the night in winter. They had sold off the village. They'd sold off the productive lands. They sold off everything. Eventually it got to the stage where they could not stay warm enough to not freeze to death. And that was the end of a 300-year, hereditary noble family that controlled a whole valley. This is where Harley-Davidson finds itself. They're not knocking out the wood of the door frames yet, but they're selling off the village. The one thing that brings in revenue. Now they still have 90.2%. There's a lot of stuff to go. They could still, like I said, go down to Wall Street tonight and raise $1 billion. Be a little more expensive, but they could do it. There's a lot they can do. But I cannot stress enough how when you're selling off portions of your factory, your historical factory, your property, when you're selling off the one asset you have left that has any sort of value at, it has to be said, pretty discounted rate, according to my brother-in-law, who's a financial professional and understood this much better than I did. The HDFS sale was not great. You have to ask yourself, where do you go from here? The signs are not pointing in the right direction.
Are there optics to this that Wall Street would think? I mean, everybody knows, I presume, everybody knows why they're doing this. They're selling it to raise funds. But are the optics of it damning as well?
I think so. I think the sale was timed. The announcement, let me rephrase that. The announcement of the sale was timed carefully to coincide with the Q2 report so as to hide the bad news. So the optics were, hooray, Harley raises $1.25 billion in cash. Wow. That's meant to distract from the fact that they had this absolutely abysmal first half. Because at the end of the day, the motor company is important. If you're not generating sales, you're not generating new loans, which feeds HDFS. So the optics are not great. Smart people, and there are lots of them in the financial services world. They know this. But there are a lot of retail investors, and the stock didn't dip; it went up, and it went up over the news that, hey, $1.25 billion in cash, which Harley said, HDI said, half of that, almost half a billion, is going to pay down debt. Not debts for HDFS; those are assets. Remember?
Yes.
Debts for the motor company, because the motor company is up to its eyeballs. It is underwater. $1 billion plus of that debt generated by Livewire. So $500 million is going into debt repayment for HD Motor Company. Another $500 million is being given to the institutional investors as a dividend. So we're giving it, they're buying, sorry, not as a dividend, they're buying back stock. Reduce the number of stock shares in the pool means the pool's value will go up. So they're trying to pull the stock price up by reducing the amount of shares. and then they claim they're going to spend the rest on R&D. And that leads us, I suppose, into the question of, well, R&D for what?
So this slide, and slide is the word, I guess, isn't it?
Unfortunately.
How clever that was of me at this hour of the morning.
It's a good segue, yeah.
Yeah. So this is 2016 to 2024, down 38%. And even KTM of all, of course, they have
bankruptcy,
significant dip at the end, but it doesn't look good, does it?
I would love to have this slide printed on a billboard or posted on, in full page in the Wall Street Journal, because the number of investors, and again, I'm on the side of everyone here. I'm on the side of good. I want everybody to come out of this strong. The investors are your parents. It's everybody who's got a pension fund. This narrative that Harley-Davidson's investor relations team has been spinning, and it is spin for 10 years. Oh, economic headwinds. No. Record sales for luxury motorcycles. Record sales for not a year, not for two, for a decade. Triumph is now for sure going to sell more motorcycles than Harley-Davidson. Privately owned company that sells products to exactly the same consumer, the same market. BMW, exactly the same consumer, same market. And what I mean by same consumer, these are people comfortable spending $10,000 to $30,000 on a toy. These are not commuter bikes. These are bikes for fun. And, they're prestige brands. They make cruisers. They make retro style bikes. BMW is patient zero for the incredible boom market we've had in the motorcycle industry in every sector. Small displacement, big displacement, on-road, off-road, retro, modern, sport bike. Well, sport bike's flat, but everything else. KTM did gangbusters. They were the canary in the coal mine because there are many similarities between KTM and their recent demise and what's going on with Harley-Davidson Incorporated. Overproduction, overexpansion into adjacent markets in which they had no expertise. The arrogance to think that, well, we've been successful before, we will continue to be successful and not adapt. BMW adapted. They came back from near bankruptcy to this. Triumph, same thing. So it's important to see this and see with clarity that it is not market headwinds. It is not, people don't want motorcycles. No, people don't want Harleys. That's the reality. Swallow that, accept it, and then let's be positive. What can we do? And there's a lot. There's a lot that can be done.
Speaking of what can be done, this is something that was announced recently, a small Harley-Davidson, in which they have never really... I'm just faking, actually. I'm clicking the slide, but it's not responding. There we go.
Yeah.
There it went. There we go. Aha. Success. And success, well, will this be success? Now, this, obviously, we have a very groovy-looking Royal Enfield and a very sort of discombobulated looking X440 Harley-Davidson, which is a Chinese motorcycle rebrand. Indian, I'm sorry, Indian. So is this, in fact, the actual bike that's been announced, or is this a hypothetical?
No, that's a real motorcycle you can buy today in India. It's a joint venture with Hero, which is the world's third largest motorcycle manufacturer. Second, it depends. Anyway, they're huge. They make millions of vehicles. So it's a made in India product for India and Southeast Asia, and it's been in the market for a while now. So the X440 is branded as a Harley-Davidson. What they announced, they gave no detail other than it will be profitable and that it will cost less than $6,000 US. Now, I celebrate this. Not this. I think the X440 is an abomination for a whole raft of reasons. But Harley-Davidson has to get out of its own way and accept the market where it is. And the market is small to medium motorcycles. BMW do it, Triumph do it, KTM was doing it, albeit poorly. Honda is killing it in the small to medium capacity globally. And we had a good conversation about that recently. This idea that, oh, people don't want small motorcycles. Royal Enfield went from selling 500,000 motorcycles to 1 million motorcycles in 4 years. 98% of those bikes are 400 cc's and below. So, this is the market everywhere, in Germany, in Japan, in the US. People want small, affordable motorcycles that are cool. The Royal Enfield Hunter is cool.
It does look cool.
The Honda CB350 is awesome. And it's so you can have your cake and eat it too.
But Michael, Harley has never, seemingly to me, never really had their heart in small motorcycles. I mean, and this should it be this bike? It proves it. But I mean, from the deal they had with Aramaki, the Italian company, and the Sprints, and I mean, I get somebody's. It's almost like their parents said, "You have to do this." It's like, I don't want to take out the garbage. I don't want to make a small motorcycle, and they did it, but they just never really had any enthusiasm for it. And I think the same thing could be said of Buell. And I mean, dealers hated Buell. I mean, I know there were a few dealers that embraced them, but by and large, most dealers would tell you that they just loathed them and were thrilled the day that Harley dumped them. And so is this a sort of a cultural thing within Harley, or am I way off base here?
No, you're right on the target. Harley-Davidson suffers from not-hereitis, more so than any other American manufacturer, and America is prone to this, generally speaking. I've said this on the record. I don't think it's a controversial statement because the facts are pretty clear. The United States is exceptional at producing software, technology, aerospace, defense, large vehicles. But the United States is not good at making efficient, small engined vehicles. Ford, GM, and what used to be Chrysler abandoned that a long time ago, 30 years ago. The smart move for most of them was to get a division in Europe or Korea to produce their small cars for them, which worked until it didn't, or to import something white label and call it a Ford, call it a GM product, a Chevrolet, whatever. And the motorcycle industry is no different. The difference is that the motorcycle industry refuses to accept this reality. So they keep trying. I want to say once, and I hope for all, Buell was a disaster of Buell's making. The mythology around Buell, that it was the thing that Harley screwed it up. No. Harley certainly didn't help in some ways, but Buell was manufacturing poorly conceived motorcycles that didn't resonate with most people, and incited a great passion and enthusiasm with a small group. It's almost Italian. So like in that sense. I like Eric Buell personally. I like some of the motorcycles. I think they're really cool, but I would never own one. And that's the attitude most people had.
Right.
To your earlier point about Aramaki, about the the Harley Street 750 500 fiasco, and it is a fiasco.
And that's roughly 10 years ago, isn't it?
Roughly 10 years ago. The problem there was, and I have inside understanding on this, you got a bunch of guys from Milwaukee swinging around the world talking to partners with so much more knowledge, so much more experience making motorcycles, period. Never mind small motorcycles. But the Milwaukee crew comes in and says, we're going to tell you how it's done. There was tremendous arrogance, tremendous willful ignorance of the facts. The Street failed, not because it was ugly, which I think it was. That's subjective. It failed because it was a badly engineered motorcycle, and it wasn't the JV partner's fault. It was because the people at Harley-Davidson insisted on certain BOM, bill of materials, price targets, which means the components were the cheapest, in many cases inadequate, like the brakes, famously, for the mass and physics of the vehicle. They insisted on having Harley premium profit margins on a vehicle that really should have been sold for $3,000. So they were selling it for $6,000. I'm generalizing. They did the same thing with Livewire, and they're doing the exact same thing with India, with the X440. They're trying to eke out a premium price from the consumer for a product that didn't earn it on merit or brand. And at some point you have to listen to what the market is telling you. Sometimes it's bitter, but we're, like we were saying earlier, as men, we're used to getting rejection, and rejection is healthy. It allows us to grow.
Well, I think what you said is key, which is that typically on a I was doing something recently at a motorcycle dealership, and they said that they make roughly 10% on a sale, and of course, 10% on a $7,000 400 Triumph is not a lot of money versus a $25,000 trophy or some big touring bike. So, but Harley is trying to make it. Now, is this pressure from dealers that are doing this, or is the attitude that if we have to make this, or at least we're going to make some decent money on it?
The pressure starts and ends in Milwaukee. The dealers are culpable for many things. Your guest, the last 2 episodes, was very good at being transparent. People didn't like what he had to say, but it's mostly true. And I say that from the OEM side.
Yeah.
The OEMs set the price. They set the targets to the dealers. They set the floor plan. Harley has been unkind to its dealers. They've been sued successfully in Japan and elsewhere for brutal, practices vis-a-vis their dealers. And they're not alone. A lot of OEMs do this, particularly in the US. So they shouldn't be singled out. That said, R&D, the most important thing in R&D is the D. Research is great. Designing stuff from white blank piece of paper, which is luckily what I get to do most of the time, is so much fun. That people pay us to do this is wonderful. But the D is the hard part. Once you've crafted something, you got to mold it, you got to shape it, you got to make it work. It's like children. Having babies is easy. Raising children is difficult.
Yeah, one of them, all it takes is a couple of martinis, and the second one takes your soul.
And 20 years and vast amounts of capital. It's roughly analogous. So, Harley doesn't invest in development. And the evidence is clear. They produced the Street 750. It flopped. What would a normal, and I'm sorry to use this as an offensive, if it's offensive to someone, then it should be. A normal, healthy manufacturer would say, oh shit, the brakes are insufficient. Guess what? Mid-production change. We're upgrading the brake system. We're going to use a different supplier. We're going to listen to our suppliers, to our contract manufacturer. We're going to solve the problems. Honda becomes Honda, not overnight, but by systemic, consistent, disciplined improvement. Harley-Davidson is not interested in that. They set a target. We're going to spend this and not a penny more. And they've done that for years, which is why they're selling 40-year-old motorcycles with new paint jobs. And, and so shocked that less and less people are interested in buying a 1980s vision of what a 1950s motorcycle should be. So they need to invest in R&D. They need to make motorcycles people want. Coming back to the small Harley, I believe you can do it if you're listening. I believe that Harley can do this. but it needs a step change in the mentality. They need to go hat in hand to smarter, wiser foreign partners who know how to do this and actually listen. Harley's job should be to write the fucking check and nothing else.
The Lowdown Show is presented by adbrider.com and supported by ebaymotors.com. Michael, the Harley-Davidson has a new CEO, ex of Top Golf and a Pizza Hut. And here's my question about CEOs. Are they chosen because they know how to run a company that makes things, like, say, Harley-Davidson motorcycles? Or are they chosen to placate and comfort shareholders of the stock?
So I kind of alluded to this earlier. The American, or I shouldn't say American, the capitalist system is actually very, very orderly. In a corporation, the board of directors has one job, which is to find a CEO and hold that CEO accountable to whatever vision they have. They approve that vision, make sure that it's sane, and then they hold that CEO to account. So in corporate governance, a CEO is pretty free to decide how to execute a plan. The board is not there to tell them, do this, do that. They're just to say, okay, what's your plan? You present a plan and then check in every 3 months to say, how's the plan going? To answer the broader question, what is the CEO's role? The CEO's role is to grow the profit and stability of a corporation, period, full stop. The answer to your question is, it depends what kind of company are we talking about. So in older societies, Germany, Japan, China, there is a sense that a company, and America used to be like this when you and I were young, just a while now, there was a sense that it was a fiduciary duty, not just to the shareholder, but also to society. That if you were the CEO of General Electric or General Motors or General Mills, you weren't just making cereal. You were providing livelihoods for people, your community, and to America. And in Japan and South Korea and Germany, this is still largely the case. So, modern times change, of course, and there are cutthroat CEOs everywhere in the world and boards that are very aggressive. But in general, Germany is home of a Mittelstand, private companies and public companies up to a certain scale, where there is an obligation, and it's not written down anywhere. It's just baked into society. You owe society to function with stability. Go make money, go grow, go be aggressive. People don't think about countries like Denmark. What is Denmark? The Little Mermaid. But Maersk is the world's second largest shipping company, logistics company. It's family run still. But there's an obligation there. Those people feel a tremendous obligation and weight. Like Denmark, a significant part of the Danish economy is on their shoulders. I think that ship sailed in America a while ago, culturally. And this show is not about that, but we're talking about Harley-Davidson. I think the answer to your question is obvious in what just happened. They hired a finance guy to run a manufacturing business. But wait, it's not a manufacturing business. It's a financial services company with a manufacturing arm. That's not a joke. That is how Wall Street sees it. That is how the board see it. That is why they hired Jochen Zeitz. People, I know all the us in the motorcycle community. Oh, he's not. He's a shoe salesman. He was a turnaround guy. He took Puma and turned it around. And that's what Harley's board said they needed at that time. And they were right. It turns out Zeitz's idea might have worked. They didn't give him the runway. Just like they didn't give Matt Levatich, the last CEO before Zeitz, the runway. These guys are smart. The moment I read a comment like these guys are dumb, they don't ride motorcycles, they don't know what they're doing. You don't need a guy who can ride a motorcycle to run a good motorcycle firm. Enzo Ferrari never drove a car after he retired from racing. He was always driven by a driver.
Or he would. I think didn't he own a Fiat because he thought who would pay that much money for a car? It was ridiculous.
The point is, he never drove his own cars. Never. It did not hurt Ferrari. I mean, maybe the company had to be bailed out by Fiat, but let me get back to this. So, like, the goal here for Harley-Davidson is to right the ship. What does right the ship mean? Arrest the sales decline somehow, feed more loans into HDFS. But wait, if we're selling more cheap bikes, the value of those loans goes down. You see how this starts to get really sticky.
Yeah.
So who did they hire? The Puma guys, Jochen Zeitz, was a premium products guy. So he tried to say, okay, we're going to shrink the number of motorcycles Harley sells, and we're going to really amp up the perceived value so we can preserve margin. And when the margin started sliding and they had that ugly proxy fight, then they were like, okay, Jochen, thanks, but it's time for you to go.
And was Zeitz booted out, or was this a planned departure?
It was a planned departure. It's just been like he had another year in his tenure, and it's technically still there, but they've announced his replacement. Read between the lines. He is nominally the CEO for another, 9 months, but he's gone. Operationally, the new guy's going to come on board, and they're changing gears. Just like when Matt Levatich, big, beautiful press release. We're so grateful to Matt. He was awesome. Here's your money. Get the fuck out. Right. That's just how corporate world often works.
Right.
And it's these people are well compensated. And again, when people start boo-hooing these people are very smart. They're very accomplished businessmen. You wouldn't, So to answer your question, do you need a motorcycle guy to run a successful motorcycle business? Right now, no. But you need someone who's going to clear-headedly look at the facts, which is, and I can't stress this enough, the Harley-Davidson Motor Company is uncompetitive. Period. That's it. There's no nuance there. They are no longer relevant or competitive in the market as it currently is. That's the fact. So, new bikes, different bikes, cheaper bikes, more expensive bikes, something has to be done on the motor company side to arrest the slide and return to profitability. Now, maybe it's less bikes. Maybe they become Ducati. They make 50, 60,000 bikes a year, but profitably. Great. The day is saved. And this guy from Pizza Hut, what do I know? He also, the company that owns Pizza Hut also owns Taco Bell and a bunch of other fast food chains. The fact that they hired a guy who comes from fast food and Topgolf, which is not extreme, expensive, premium golf course experience, but casual, easy golf light for the suburbanite who just wants a nice evening. I looked into it. Topgolf is very successful because they're not selling golf as a sport. They're selling it as something to do for 2 hours on a suburban afternoon. It's an alternative to going to the movies or going to bowl. And he grew the company by appealing to everyday people at everyday pricing. What does that tell you about what the board hopes he'll do with Harley and the announcement of a cheap bike? So I think this is good. Now, I will end this segment by saying I don't have a great deal of confidence that they'll pull this off. They're so beholden to the share price. The pressure is so great by their the big institutional investors who hold the biggest number of shares. If this doesn't see significant delta change in 3 quarters, they're going to Matt Levatich this guy out of there. They're going to Jochen Zeitz this guy out of there. And they're going to blame him, someone, something, tariffs, the moon, whatever.
Well, we all know that the moon is responsible for all of my moods.
Well, I've known that for 20 years.
It's been a long time, yeah. It's been a long So the Matt Levitich, who was the CEO prior to Zeitz,
Yeah.
he had the all roads to Harley Davidson, or whatever the term was.
Yes, that's right.
And then Zeitz had the no roads to Harley Davidson.
He had Rewire, Hardwire, and then something else. It was Livewire, Rewire, Hardwire. All three very nicely branded.
Sure it wasn't underwire like a bra? No.
Should have been.
Unrelated. Supports and separates. That was Wonder Bra. Lifts and separates, right? As a kid, I remember these things. but there were two very distinct approaches. Levitich was run out of town, as was Zeitz, for doing different things. So wasn't Levitich's version of the company, which is a much broader, more motorcycles, more inexpensive motorcycles, electric motorcycles, and yet that didn't work. And yet, isn't this new guy? Doesn't his history suggest that he may do something comparable?
It does, and I've said this on record a year ago. Matt was the right guy for the job. Matt had the right plan, in my opinion. You can point to Livewire and say this was a failure. Yes, because they did not finish executing the plan. Livewire was never going to be $28,000 bikes. It was going to, the bulk of Livewire were going to be those really inexpensive pedal and non-pedal. I mean, they patented these things. This sort of like super lightweight electric scrambler that was almost a moped in terms of thick, like width and lightweight. Then they had this little beach buggy thing, and then they had pedal electric bikes. That was the plan, and it would have worked.
And why did they deviate from that?
Ask them. I think it comes back to a point you made earlier.
They won't talk to me.
They won't talk to anyone because they don't like listening to countervailing counterfactuals.
Right.
It's arrogance. We know best. Sturgis is happening right now, or just happened. I don't know. It's that mentality. This is Harley-Davidson. It is about freedom and chrome and the American road and cue the, screaming eagle. It can be more than one thing. Look at Porsche. Porsche survived bankruptcy by making an SUV, a 4-door hatchback that was ugly. And today it's a company that's making money hand over fist. Well, not this year, but for the last 15, 17 years. You can't make an electric Porsche. Well, the Taycan was a runaway success for 3 years. It's the most copied electric car in the premium sector. The Chinese have shamelessly ripped off the Taycan. So you can still be a 911 for the devotees who it has to be Porsche, it has to be and race at Le Mans, and do all that, and also do the other thing and sell a Macan to a housewife. Pardon the the cliche, but to a person who's just trying to go drop off the kids and maybe go to work. You can walk and chew gum. You can make an electric glide and also put the Harley-Davidson label on something else. BMW do it in car and motorcycle. Hasn't hurt them. But there's this attitude that this is this sacrosanct world of the pushrod V-twin. And so a bunch of beardy old guys shout. They don't own shares. They don't own stock, but they make enough noise. And then you get some blowhard on a podcast that totally misdirected for the last year and a half that DEI had somehow torpedoed Harley-Davidson. Sir, I don't follow, the manosphere and right-wing podcasts, but if this gentleman is hearing this, Harley-Davidson torpedoed Harley-Davidson. It had nothing to do with them, hiring a woman or, a brown guy or whatever they think happened. Harley-Davidson was sliding into irrelevancy long before, thanks largely due to white old guys like me. So, the core is that more roads to Harley-Davidson is the right path. It sounds like they're kind of doing that. They have to go and embrace volume. They have to embrace lower price points. And I'm not talking about t-shirts and belt buckles. I'm talking about actual vehicles or vehicle experiences. And I suspect they're going to try and do that, because this guy is not about things, like you said. Pizza Hut's not selling pizza. Pizza Hut is selling, I don't need to cook tonight. So Topgolf is selling, hey, my goofy sister and her family are coming in from out of town. What are we going to do with them on Friday night? Let's go to Topgolf for 2-3 hours. So I suspect they're going to lean into some kind of experience center. And all I could say to that is Porsche, Mercedes, and Ferrari tried that, and it didn't work. It's not going to work for Harley.
There is no motorcycle brand that invokes feelings of positivity and negativity more than Harley-Davidson. It's always been like that. You either are, well, even the term, are you a Harley guy or not? It's like there's this definition of, it's almost like, are you a communist or are you not? And so why is Harley important? Why do they matter?
I think Harley-Davidson embodies a lot of the qualities that their marketing say they do, but sincerely. So they always talk about freedom. Look, that's not unique. Every motorcycle gives you freedom. A 3 horsepower moped gives you freedom when you're 14 years old. But what I think Harley embodies is the qualities I personally admire and am envious of in Americans. Americans have so much self-belief and self-confidence. And as a non-American, I can tell our American listeners that sometimes that is annoying. But secretly, I think we all kind of wish we could feel that way more often. And, Harley-Davidson embodies that, like, I don't care what you think about me. I am this. I am so unashamedly this. It looks like nothing else in the market. Moto Guzzi made cruiser-ish, Japanese all-made cruisers. They were called clones derisively, and they were, really. They were better motorcycles. They were better machines. But nobody really loved them. And I say that as an enthusiast of Japanese motorcycles. Harley-Davidson deserves an American Hollywood resurrection story, because no other brand embodies that quality, that, like, I'm brash, I'm a little arrogant, I'm a big guy, and I don't care what the world thinks. I'm going to go out and be me. And I think motorcycling in general, no matter what you ride, is a little bit about that. We put on a helmet and we become different people. Maybe we hope a more idealized version of ourselves, more confident, faster, more skilled, cooler. And yeah, I mean, look, I do. I'll speak for myself. I do. I love sport motorcycles. When I put on my gear and I get on my Ducati, I have this whole cocktail of imagery in my head of how I see myself. And it's not something I would admit to my wife, but I'll tell all these people listening, I want to be this effete, guy who can handle this unwieldy Italian sport motorcycle and do these amazing things. And I'm not. I'm just a middle-aged guy who can ride okay. But isn't that why we ride? And it makes me happy.
Yeah, it is so much in the psyche, and for many people, if they couldn't, and this still exists, if they couldn't ride a Harley-Davidson, they wouldn't really have any interest in motorcycling. There are no other brands, and I think that that in itself is astounding, because if I couldn't ride a Ducati, I'd be perfectly happy with an Aprilia or something else, or a Guzzi,
something equally imperfect.
Exactly. As long as I could, as long as they could prove to me that it had a number of flaws, then I'm on board. But Harley, I mean,
I have a motorcycle to sell you, by the way.
there is no company that I think fully has the buy-in like Harley does, and I mean, diversity is good, and
100%.
we should have these brands that are bizarrely attached to the country of origin,
Yes.
and it is so, as you nicely articulated. I mean, it is such an American motorcycle, and it is such, and we want that Americanness to remain.
100%. And again, if anybody significant from Harley-Davidson is listening, we all have this love-hate relationship with Americana. And I would go so far as to say, I think Americans have a love-hate relationship with Americana. I mean, anyway. But the thing that we love is this effervescence, this glow. It's childlike, and I mean that in the best sense. The world needs Harley-Davidson. I think the world's a better place, a richer place with Harley-Davidson. I want Harley-Davidson to succeed wildly. And I think there are many paths to do that. I think there are a lot of smart people who know this. It's up to management to listen to them, and make the tent bigger. That's really what it comes down to. Make the tent bigger so more people can actually enjoy these bikes and motorcycling. Because motorcycling has done a lot for me. I think it's done a lot for mobility in the world. More people depend on motorcycles to get to school, to get to market, to look after their families than they do than cars. The power two-wheeler is extremely important to the world economy. It's extremely important to billions of ordinary people. And even in a wealthy country like the United States, the motorcycle has the capacity to do that again, like it did in the 1960s and 70s for the baby boomers when they got on their imported low-cost Japanese motorbikes that were 50, 80, 200 cc. I'm not suggesting Harley has to be that, but it definitely can, I think, appeal to young people in a way that no other brand can if they just make the product accessible, and make the tent bigger. And I really hope that that's what happens.
eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. Ever try to buy a car in line and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? Well, that era is over. Now with secure purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car, it's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery. It's all built in. This is the modern way to buy your next ride on eBay. eBay, things people love. Secure purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary.